We are on our third week of understanding postmodernism. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 3 to start off for our scripture reading. And let me make sure we put this into a context. God creates the world in Genesis chapter 1, and then he selects Abraham as his man that he's going to reveal God's word to. Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has the 12 tribes of Israel. 12 tribes of Israel go to Egypt. They're in Egypt for 400 years, and then they end up in slavery, and God sends Moses to get the children of Israel out of bondage. And God shows up at Moses, where Moses is working. He shows up at his job site. Very inconvenient, really, if you think of God's timing. Don't show up at my work. Talk to me after work. But God shows up where Moses is working, and he comes to him in a burning bush. And this is that famous story of the burning bush. And God talks to him, and this is what he says. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. The I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. Go assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done in Egypt, and I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hivites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders, and I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. There's some interesting things I want to talk about. We're going to come back to this. But we're in Exodus here. Moses is sent on a mission, and the Israelites are asking a rational question. How do we know that it's, who is this? It's a question of knowledge. So we're going to be talking about knowledge. How do we know? This is kind of last week, part 2, which is the study of epistemology. So let's walk through, kind of review where we've been at so far, so that we can hit this. What was pre-modern reasoning? Do we remember? How do we kind of describe pre-modern reasoning? I know we've slept since then.
We know because people told us what we know.
We know by different sources of authority have told us this. What were some of those different sources of authority? You remember?
Church.
The church. Forefathers. Society. Experience. Reason and logic is a part of this. The Bible is a source. These are all different sources of authority. And modernism did what to all these different sources of authority?
Disempowered them, essentially.
It did what?
They disempowered them, so they didn't trust them anymore.
Right, they made them untrustworthy. They said, these sources are no longer reliable. We have to cut them off. So they cut the individual off from different sources of authority. And that's essentially the pre-modern to modern shift, is that the authority that kind of had held humanity together, at least in Europe, through all these different sources of authority, were kind of systematically chopped off, so that what you were left with was reason, logic, and experience is kind of where we left off at. what was kind of the image that they used of how to understand the universe? How did they understand how the universe functioned? I gave it kind of a really easy image. But that was the pre-modern, the modernistic. What was the modernistic understanding of how the universe functioned? We talked about Newton and the law of gravity and all those different things. Remember? It's a clock. That's right. It's an image of a clock. Now, that they really think the universe is a clock. No. But what's the imagery? What is that giving us?
Every piece has a purpose.
Every piece has a purpose. Everything is moving towards a functionality. One thing plus one thing equals another. It's a machine. And they thought of the universe as a machine that is not organic, it's mechanistic. How do we think of truth? What was truth? Remember, we kind of work towards this? How do we get at truth? Facts. Right, so we use facts, and what do we call them kind of fact packets, right? And then, so if you get enough facts together and you cobble them together, that'll give you maybe a more foundational truth. And then you move on from that truth to another truth to another truth. And that's how they believed you were going to get to truth, right? And then at the end of last week, and they believed that truth was discoverable through human reason. We watched the video at the very end, and we didn't really have a chance to talk about it. So I'm going to kind of throw some ideas back out there and let us regurgitate it maybe a little bit, because we really didn't have a chance to talk about it. Do you remember we had Gary Habermas on one side, Kenneth Humphreys on the other? And Humphreys was saying, do you remember some of the things he was saying?
Which one was which again?
Humphreys was the guy who looked like Antoine LaVey. He was the kind of ponytail, beard. He was the non-Christian, the atheist. That was Kenneth Humphreys.
Looked kind of like Satan.
Look, didn't he kind of look like Satan? I mean, he wasn't, but he kind of looked like it, if you're going to be honest. Do you remember some of the things he was saying?
He tried to say that like somebody who's proving atheism has like, basically they're being really genuine. There's nothing they can gain from proving that atheism is what is true. But he said like Christianity, like you have a lot to gain. And so, I don't know, maybe like when the Christians are stacking up their facts, it's already a little more slanted because they can benefit off of the idea of Christianity being real.
Right, that's what one of the arguments that he said is the church has kind of made it beneficial for you. The church has kind of controlled. Did you hear that language of controlling society? The church has kind of tilted everything. And do you remember what Habermas kind of said in response? Because he was saying the resurrection is just a ridiculous idea. It's crazy. It's so far out there. It's unbelievable, was what Humphrey was saying. And Habermas responded, how?
I remember a couple things. One, he's saying, you know, you do have things, you know, you do have a presupposition. Mm-hmm. And then the one I really liked that I remember was like, and all of your thought process can be cured by a philosophy 101 course.
Right? This idea that all of these facts are just, everyone should all see what the facts mean. Did you kind of get that from him? He thought all of us should be able to sit down and look at the facts and go, oh, you're right. The idea of God is just completely ridiculous. It must take an incredible amount of information to get us over this hump. And Habermas's point was, it's not fantastical when you look at it from the idea that maybe that God does exist and that God is all-powerful. The idea of a resurrection isn't as crazy when you have that as a belief, when you believe in God. And Humphreys is saying, well, yeah, that belief isn't justified. Well, what makes a belief justified? And that's where he said to him, well, you need a philosophy course, like Philosophy 101 will knock this idea out of you that you are objective and we're biased. The reality is both of us have biases. And that, kind of in a nutshell, kind of demonstrates the shift that's occurred over the last 200 years. That discussion, 150 years ago, everyone was saying, well, you're kind of right. Yeah, it is kind of obvious that these kind of things don't make sense. And there's a lot of things we have to overcome. What do we think of that video? Did that resonate? Did that help? Did that help illustrate what we were talking about? I know we've kind of rehashed it a little bit, but what did we think about that from last week?
I think it illustrated a modernist viewpoint versus a postmodernist viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is, everybody kind of comes with their own axes to grind. Everybody has their own perspective. And Habermas is saying this is like Philosophy 101, which tells you what about modernism and tells us what about philosophy.
wasn't here last week, but there's selective ignoring of things. And so you ignore things that aren't going to fit your own viewpoint of the world that you've come to love.
That you believe in.
Right.
And we kind of call this the fact. Do you remember what the other side was? There's a fact-value split, right? That in the modernist worldview, facts are all that matters, and values, well, they're kind of subjective, and they kind of float from person to person, and they're not really trustworthy. Your values are just kind of, they're a guaranteed way to get a bias. I'm not biased. I don't have those values. My value is objectivity, and I'm looking at these facts dispassionately. You believe in God, you're viewing them passionately. And so your bias is influencing the way you examine and look at the facts. It's called the fact-value split. One half of, well, almost all modernists believe I'm objectively getting at the truth, and I'm able to do it objectively. You are a values person, and you're not getting at it objectively. Your values are blinding you to facts. That pretty much is what Humphreys was saying.
Yeah.
Your values are making you blind to the reality that the resurrection is really stupid. And Habermas is saying, we both have perspectives here. And we're both, and you can see how we've kind of moved, like, that's not very common. In philosophical, historical, anything outside of science, Habermas's view is pretty much standard now. Hey, we all have data. We all have ways that we're looking at things. And our perspective is going to skew us. Yeah?
I think intelligent design is one area that really puts a crimp on that.
Yeah.
Because they explicitly don't talk about God, but they look at all the facts, and really the probability of things happening by chance is impossible on how complex it is. And so it just makes the person, or the perceptor, perceiver, realize that there is an intelligent being that we've been designed by, our universe has been designed by.
I think that intelligent design definitely has been a way of trying to go at individuals who are trying to deal with things in a only facts way, without acknowledging the fact that they are coming at evolution with a personal bias. But I think that we still have to acknowledge that whether we are talking evolution or intelligent design, both individuals are coming at it with a bias.
That's what postmodernism would say.
Right.
Postmodernism is saying you're coming at these issues with a bias. And for you to be able to get to intelligent design, you're not doing it dispassionately. You're kind of engaged. But we're kind of walking through, I'm kind of describing rather than proscribing. I'm trying to describe as how we got to where we're all sitting in here going, oh yeah, everyone has a perspective and that's obvious. Like, do you notice that? We're all in this room and we're all going, well yeah, everybody has a perspective. And yeah, their values influence them. We all are kind of going, yeah, that's the reality. Guess what? That shows we're living in a postmodern world.
I think the interesting thing is that in general, we all philosophically believe that, but in application, we don't apply it to ourselves. You know? Sure.
My view is more factual.
Yeah, more factual. But I believe that, you know, in a general sense, that I can't know.
Sure.
Well, you can't know.
Right.
I
can know, but you can't know. It is very selective. And this is where postmodernism is very muggy, it's murky, and it's difficult. But you can see we're all affected by it. Because all of us here listen to Habermas and go, yeah, you're right, your perspective is skewing your data. 150 years ago, that would have been a different conversation. It would have been, it just would have played out differently. Yeah?
When we talked about like the modernist perspective on values, I feel like in our postmodern world, there's kind of what Mr. Swan was saying, Dr. Swan, there's different perspectives on how we apply that. How we apply that to what are these values, these truths.
Yes.
As Christians, we tend to believe in that objective truth.
Yes.
But others in that postmodern world aren't.
And the question becomes, are we trying to convert people to objective truth, or are we trying to convert people to Christ? And this is tricky. I'm not saying that there isn't objective truth. It was when you're talking to people, what are you trying to get them to understand? Are you trying to get them to agree with you about objective truth? Or are you trying to get them to accept Christ? And those, a lot of people, modernists, very much want to link them together. If you accept this, then you'll accept the other one. It gets tricky in a postmodern context. But what we're trying to do today is we're trying to walk, okay, how do we get from pre-modern to modern and to postmodern? Okay, that's what we're trying to do today. But you guys can see we're here, right? Like, we're all here, we're all going, yeah, perspective matters. And what your values are matters. But they're living in a world where for them, they had them all separated. They thought they were truly being objective, and that being objective was possible. And if you had a different perspective than me, and this is really important, if you and I differ, you can hear this in Humphreys. If you and I differ, there's a logic problem. There's not a values problem, there's a logic problem. One of the two of us is what? Illogical. We live in a different world than that. That's why some of his arguments are really kind of out of date. Not that I'm saying they're wrong per se, it's just that society has kind of moved on from those kind of arguments. And you have to make different ones. Yeah, Beth.
Thinking about the timeline between the height of modernism and the emergence of postmodernism, didn't we have, like, you know, a couple world wars between there where it cuts through the objective and, like, people realize that we are not just objective, static, fact-dependent creatures. We're more than that.
We're invested. This is existentialism, which we can't get into today, but existentialism throws a lot of these things in there, and we'll talk about those at a different time, because we can't literally hit everything. In 1,500 years of history, we just can't hit it all. What I want to talk about today is we're talking about epistemology. How do we get in terms of epistemology? Do you remember what epistemology is? What kind of a question is it? We have first-order questions, second-order questions, and then what was the third one? Meta questions. What was epistemology? Do you remember? It's a meta question about what? What does it cover? How do I know, Moses? How will the Israelites know that you're on my side? Moses gives a different answer. Interesting when you look at these things. Go back and read Exodus and ask it from an epistemological standard. What kind of questions was he asking? What kind of questions were the Israelites asking? It's just interesting when you do this. So we're talking about epistemology today. I want to kind of keep us moving in that direction. So the fact-value split is, I would argue, it's the definitive thing about modernism. If you understand the fact-value split, how that works, and how it plays itself out, I would argue it's the most critical component of modernism. They want to divide facts and values. They want to split them apart so that one doesn't bleed into the other. Because you'll get to know the truth, the more values you can push out. That's kind of their idea. So initially, moderns thought that all truth could be captured by reason and logic. They didn't just believe it was science, because it starts off with, we're going to literally uncover everything about the universe by using logic and reason. They really truly believed all truths were capturable through logic, reason, and then they had to start dealing with science. How do we incorporate science? Because the science isn't just logic and reason, it's experience. It's testing things. So initially they started off like gangbusters. We're going to, if you want to think about it as the emperor wears no clothes, you ever heard that story? Story about he tells everybody that these are my great new clothes, and it's the emperor has no clothes kind of thing. We're showing the world the truth. The truth is, the Bible is a fallacious mythological document. The truth is, we all know the universe functions according to immutable laws that can't be changed. The truth is, we're going to uncover all the truths using human reason and human logic. And things were going along really powerfully. They had incorporated empiricists, and then a guy by the name of Immanuel Kant. I would spell his first name, but I can't. Like that was kind of funny, right? Immanuel Kant comes along in 1781. He writes a book called Critique of Pure Reason. And there is a pre-Kantian world, and then there's a post-Kantian world. And the pre-Kantian world is utterly and completely invested in reason, logic, and humanity's ability to understand it all. That we can do it, we have the ability to do it, and anybody who disagrees with us is utterly and completely wrong. Kant comes along, and he kind of changes the discussion, and Kant's critique of pure reason leads us in some ways to where we are today. It's a little bit philosophical, so try to follow along with me if you can.
All right, what years we?
We're talking 1781 is when he writes Critique of Pure Reason. So this is when our country is just nascently being born. It's hard to put ourselves on this kind of a scale. All right, we're really talking about large time frames, and ideas change slowly. We've been in a postmodern world for about almost 60 years now. But we don't think of it like that because there's a lot of residuals that's coming. So in terms of time scale, this is happening right around the time where we're fighting the very tail end of the American Revolution. So Kant's Critique of Pure Reason is this idea of, okay, so how do we understand our knowing in the world? Well, let's talk about this chair for a minute. I love chairs. I think they're fun to use for philosophy. We all think we know what they are. And it's so wonderful. The more you probe and kick them around and throw them around, you're kind of, you know what, I don't know that I know what they are. So we're going to use a chair. You can look at this chair, right? You can see it. You can measure it. You can weigh it. And we kind of put it on scales, and we can kind of pluck these things out and throw them into little Bunsen burners, right? We kind of burn it up. So, oh, this is 18% carbon and 24% frisionium, or, there's a whole bunch of things we can put in there, right? We can kind of burn them and kind of figure out this is metal, this is cloth, this is some kind of synthetic thing. And this is all, and this is how Kant argues. He says, this is how we understand it. This is the thing as we perceive it. I want you to catch this, okay? This is the thing as we perceive it. It is as we use it, it's how we interact with it, it's how we touch it, it's how we do all kinds of things with it. We are perceiving it, and we're perceiving it in a lot of different ways. When I say chair and I'm not having it in front of you, you still can think of a chair. Right? It's still in your head, even though it's not in front of you. The thing as we perceive it is all of that. And then what he differentiated was the thing as it is in itself. This sounds really easy. Like some of us kind of go, I can't believe that's what he's saying. This was a hard concept for people to grasp. We see it, we perceive it, we understand it, but it goes through us. It comes through us. What it is in and of itself, what does a chair think of a chair? It doesn't, right? So what is it? How do you know what a chair is in and of itself? What it is in its own nature? There's a chair as I can get to it. There's a chair as I understand it. But then there's the chair as it really is. And let me use the illustration because I'm getting a lot of, Let's talk about gravity, right? Newton talked about it as a force between two different, this is the sun, right? And this is Earth. He talked about it as a force between two different objects with mass, and they're pulling on each other. It was like a mechanistic clock. Einstein came along, and what did he say about it? That gravity isn't a force that's pulling from the sun and the Earth. Gravity is actually bending space and time. I'm not a physicist, so don't ask me how it does this. That's not what I'm getting at. The issue is this. Gravity as Newton perceived it was this. Gravity as Einstein perceived it is what? This. What is gravity in itself? Not under anyone's perception, but what it's actually doing. For real, what we might argue is the truth. Who would know that? God. God would know that because He knows how to make it. The rest of us are all stuck where? We're stuck as we can perceive it. Now what Kant's argument is this. Look, you can't get here. You can't get to what it is in itself. All you can do is get it as you perceive it. So your perspective is going to taint the way you see the world. And what does this mean? Is there anything you can do about it? No.
You can't.
You can't. Perfect. There's nothing you can do about it. Who's right, Newton or Einstein? Do you think someone else is going to come along in another 300 years and rethink what gravity is for us. Is that possible? It is. So what does that make Einstein and Newton? Were they wrong? It's all about person. Did you see how this would lead us to where we're at today? This is Immanuel Kant's critique of pure reason. And this is what he says. Look, don't try to talk about the thing as itself. You can't get there. It's beyond us. It's our limit. What we should focus on is what we can perceive. Focus on what we can perceive, and that's how we'll go forward. But the pre-Kantian world thought, as I'm perceiving it, is what it really is. Post-Kantian world says what? The way I'm perceiving it
is the way I'm perceiving it.
Is the way I'm perceiving it. And there's no guarantee that there's a relationship between truth and my perception. What do we think of this?
It's filtered into our very language, where you're trying to explain something and you're like, I may be wrong, but we use
Right?
it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So, I have a lot of thoughts here. First of all, it's only a problem if it's not a problem for the chair.
Yeah, it's not a problem for the chair. The chair doesn't have these thoughts.
It's only a problem for people who have reason, or beings that have reason.
Okay.
And so there's this person, Gibson is his name, which I think it was a female, wrote in the 70s, and it's a motor control learning kind of a thing, about objects that you perceive have their utility as you ascribe meaning.
Yeah.
And so it's the purpose of it is going to be how you perceive it.
What you think it is, how you think it ought to work. Do you see why there's a pre-Kantian world and a post-Kantian world?
And there's evidence for it. I have a niece who we took camping once, and she'd never been camping. And so we got out of the truck, and she found a chair and sat down on the chair with her white shorts.
Oh.
And it turned out it was actually a fire grate that was turned around. She had never seen one before, but it fit her body size perfectly. And she sat down on it. And it was her chair. She stood up and looked like a zebra.
But in her mental framework, because she didn't have any other way to put it into, it was a chair.
Yeah, and so it's called an affordance,
Yes.
objects we perceive.
Yes. This Kantian idea, it is going to just keep on going. Okay? Who thinks philosophy is fun? This is fun. So I enjoy this stuff. I think this is interesting because this kind of moves us from one way of thinking about the world into another way of thinking about the world. So roughly at the same time you get Kant, who's moving forward, you have a guy by the name of Friedrich Schleiermacher. I'm not sure if this is spelled right.
Michael, while you're writing up that, could I just say,
Yeah.
what's your name again?
Bev.
Never.
We think of this as like this big, huge time frame.
Yes.
She said, we always say, I could be wrong. How many in my generation use that phrase?
Right? Not very
I
many.
honestly, I rarely ever use that. It's not that I can't believe I can be wrong.
Yes.
I know I'm wrong.
Yeah, but part of that's your
What?
doctrines.
I'm just so smart. I'm so rarely wrong.
In our generation, that has
Yes.
become more and more prevalent.
Yes.
To state that.
Yes.
Not that my generation thinks we can't be wrong. We know we can.
Yes.
It just doesn't.
It's all of this bleeding effect. It's not like there's a hard line and suddenly everyone stopped being modern. This thing continues and there's parts of it. And you're right, a lot of moderns will not say things like, I could be wrong, but this is my perspective. That's not how it goes.
We don't have delusions of grandeur.
Right, a modern might argue, this is why I think I'm right. And here's my argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. I don't think your argument's right because argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. Whereas a postmodern is going to come in here and say, well, I don't see it like that. I see it a little differently. It shows up in our language and the way we interact with people. And the more you're open, not to Schleiermacher, but to Kant, the more you're going to be understanding, well, my perspective really is an important part of how I understand the world.
And just so you know, I do not mean that he's an egotist. But he has to be confident with his patients.
That's exactly
when
right.
he's explaining what
That's
the
exactly right.
options
If a
are.
doctor
No
goes
one
in,
wants to hear that.
no one wants to hear you're wrong.
Exactly. He could be wrong.
You could have a tumor on your ovaries. I could be wrong. So here's the thing. Science is rolling along and they believe they're going to uncover everything. And then Kant comes along, and right around the same time as Schleiermacher. Now what Schleiermacher says is this. Remember, science is just ripping away all of the mysteries of the universe. We know there's no miracles. We know that the Bible is false. We know that there was no resurrection. We know all these things can't happen. So what is that leaving for the church? What is that leaving for God and for faith? What is the church? What is faith? How do we handle this?
A lot of people, I mean, you had a few camps. I mean, some people were like, well, I don't care. I just take it by faith. I throw away reason and I take it by faith.
Yes.
We talk about Kierkegaard.
Yes.
There's some people, the rationalists, where it's like, well, these are spiritual truths. The physical reality of it doesn't matter. It's the fact that it's a broad spiritual truth. Close to what Schleiermacher is going to do. What Schleiermacher does is he says, religion is a sense of dependency. That's what Schleiermacher teaches us, is he says, look, because science is gobbling up, like Pac-Man, in a very real way, like Pac-Man, walk, 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 walk. He's gobbling up all of the world and leaving less and less space for God. He shrinks the world down. We all know what those things are, and God has shrunk to this tiny little gap. And what we can't explain gets put into this gap. Well, Schleiermacher says, no, you're not thinking about this correctly. Faith is a sense of dependency. It's an emotion. It's a feeling. These are things that we sense. Now, what kind of facts can you bring into this? No. There's not a lot of facts to deal with. Now, what he does is he shifts the discussion away from facts and values, and he says religion, and what he's trying to do is he says religion carves out this little tiny area called experience and feelings. And it says, this is our territory. Your ideas about the creation of the world, well, that's not a factual thing. Those aren't really telling us facts about the universe. Those are spiritual truths that are supposed to teach us about our dependency on God. And so what he does is he tries to carve out a space for religion in a world that is going Pac-Man, and they hadn't hit Kant yet. Kant hadn't come into the scene. Schleiermacher's dealing with a pre-Kantian world, and he makes this argument that faith has this carved out niche that nobody can touch. Because why? Science deals with facts, and faith deals with values. And they split them apart. They say, and so what you end up with is in 1997, a guy by the name of Stephen Jay Gould, who knows who he is? He's a famous agnostic/atheist. He says that science and religion are non-overlapping magisterium. Now, let's make sure you understand what he's talking about here. Who's heard of a Venn diagram? What?
Yes.
Yeah, the Venn diagram is something like this, right?
Yeah.
Right? People who I like Venn diagrams. People who don't like Venn diagrams, right? And who are the people in here? These are the strange ones, right? That's a Venn diagram. The non-overlapping magisterium says there are spheres of life. There are the fact spheres, and there's the values. This is not a great pen, is it? Probably can't even see that in the back. There's a values sphere, and then there's the fact spheres, and these don't overlap. And this is why science, for a long time, refused to have, because of this war between values and facts, science said, we're only going to stay here, or at least that's what Stephen Jay Gould proposed. I'm not saying they actually followed it. And the religious people were supposed to stay over here. And this is where you'll get people who will say, this isn't your field, stay out of it. It's this concept that facts and values should not be intermixed. This is fundamental to understanding modernism. Okay? That facts and values should not overlap, because this is going to play out with postmoderns. Because whereas moderns all wanted to live in fact land, guess where postmoderns want to live? They want to live in values land. And as long as you retain the fact-value split, you're living in some form of modernism. Pre-moderns didn't have that. They didn't separate life into neat little packages. So what you'll end up with is a lot of postmoderns who are running around still acting with the values of modernism. This is why you'll hear this. Don't give me your facts. Your facts come from Fox News. Right? Facts don't matter anymore like they used to. If you wanted to have a rational discussion with a modernist, you'd sit down. This was fantastic, by the way. I was talking with Clayton last week. This was so interesting because it was Sean and me and Clayton. We were standing right back here. And we were talking about mathematics and spreadsheets and numbers. And do you remember what you said, Clayton? You may not. He said, anybody can make numbers say anything they want.
Yeah.
You can make numbers say anything you want. If you'd have said that 100 years ago, the modernists would have said, yeah, but somebody's manipulating the data somewhere. There's a bias somewhere squeezing it in, so numbers can't. If they're honest, if they're objective, numbers can't be messed with. If they are being messed with, somebody's messing with them. Here we are in the 21st century, and Clayton says, hey, numbers will say whatever you want them to say. And it's this belief, it's this understanding that your facts come out of a place. They come out of values. So you end up with the postmoderns. This is honest to goodness, you're going to run into this, guys. You talk to postmoderns and you'll give them fact after fact after fact after fact, and guess what? Not only are they not impressed, what are they?
They're all more convinced.
They're annoyed.
They're annoyed. And you're saying to yourself, why do you not see these facts? Why can you not understand this world in which we're living? It's because they're living with this split between facts and values. And the more ultra-modern you are, the more you're going to keep that split. A true postmodern will begin to merge these together in tricky ways. Yeah?
Just to go off of Clayton's point, you can make these numbers say whatever you want. How many times have we heard differences in nutrition and like, oh no, you gotta do this diet. No, wait, you need to do this diet. No, you need to eat this. No, you shouldn't eat that. You should eat this. And
how many times, we can ask Sean this, how many times has breast milk been avowed and disavowed in the last 60 years?
I don't know the number.
Right? I think when I was a kid, they said, no, don't give your kids breast milk, give them formula. There's more nutrients in formula. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't know of all these positive benefits of breast milk. And so we're back to breast milk. Then they went to formula. Oh, we've upped this formula. It's much better now, right? Back and forth. There's emotional, right? There's emotional support that this doesn't give you.
You can't outdo God. Okay, I'm sorry.
But do you see the issue here, I hope?
So we can find what we think are facts on anything. I mean, you can Google coffee is good and find 100 sites that agree with you. And you can Google coffee is evil and you can find 100 sites that
That is exactly right. So when you're talking to a postmodern, if you're going to try to live in fact land, guess what? They're going to have their own facts. And your facts are just going to annoy them.
Yeah.
Okay? So then how do you talk to these people? How do you talk to people who don't really value facts, but value values? This is why you'll get people who, we think it's kind of crazy. You're like, that person doesn't self-identify as a man. Look at their DNA, right? Look at their DNA. Your DNA is going to tell you what they are. They're like, that doesn't matter to them. And so we go, these people are crazy. It's really easy. Do a DNA test. You'll figure out if they're male or female. And they go,
You're
yes,
supposing
but
your heteronormative worldview on the DNA.
right. It is because of values. You're making them feel bad. It goes back to values. So, how do we witness to people who have a fact-value split? And how do you recognize them? How do we know? Well, I'll tell you how. If you start talking to a person, you start giving them facts and information, and they start pulling up their own facts and their own information, guess what? If you're having a debate about facts, you can have a debate about facts. But if they start dismissing what you're saying, not listening to what you're saying at all, guess what? You're now living in values land.
So to go back to what you just said, is a fact value split up to a certain point where they become emotional, where they become then the values?
Yes! These become, like, I'm emotionally charged. You have said homosexuality is wrong. That's not a fact about the universe. You hate them.
And
You want to kill them. You're a murderous Nazi. And you're going, what in the world just happened? It's because they're living in value land, and it has nothing to do with facts. It's all about how they feel and how they perceive other people feeling.
Yeah. And if it's about sexuality, realize seriously that as Christians we need to be taking back the narrative, especially in postmodern day. There's an excellent book, and right now I'm blanking on the name of it, but if you're interested in the topic, please text me. I will give you the name and author of a wonderful book that it's tragic. It really is tragic because we have allowed literally in postmodernistic thought on sexuality a discipling that even in Christians there is a discipling of thought on the topic.
And we'll have a conversation at another time about how we recognize all those different things. But the idea is this.
Right.
Most of us people, Christians, begin to try to put these things together. We believe Jesus really died on the cross. And this is not just some idea. It's not some kind of mythical truth. Like, we believed real death, real resurrection. So the idea that these things happen in real time, these are part of our facts. But we also understand that you might not perceive it like that. So we live in this kind of halfway world, and we have for actually a long time. Christians have lived here for a very long time, recognizing the role that your beliefs play in your recognition of facts. So Christians live in this kind of halfway world. Postmodernism can make you swing all kinds of crazy places. 200 years ago, it was all about facts, and they conceived nothing of values. We're now in another completely different environment where it's all about values and making people feel certain ways. And we go, but what about the facts? We're in a weird spot. Okay? But that's not a bad thing. You got to learn how to listen to what they're saying. A modernist will listen to someone's argument and they'll go, this fact is wrong, this fact is wrong, this fact, maybe not so wrong. That we have some common ground there. When you're listening to someone who's all the way in values lands, you got to get rid of your facts and you got to start listening to what they're feeling. Stop trying to convince them of the facts. Listen, I'm not arguing the facts. I'm saying you're talking Spanish to a person who is French or someone who's speaks Khmer. You're speaking two different languages. So you have to listen for what they're feeling. You feel that. That's the kind of language you can use when you're talking to them. What I hear you saying is I hear you feel that this is X, Y, and Z. That gives you a touch point. And trust me, they can come around to your facts if they feel that you are trustworthy. If they feel that you care. If they feel, they'll go with a lot of people's facts. How come? Because values are what matter to them. Thoughts on this today before we go? Yeah, Elizabeth.
We're taught this in elementary school. When you get upset with someone, you don't say you did this. You say, I feel this way when you do this. Like you're taught to just do that from elementary school up through college.
Absolutely.
I wasn't taught that. My dad was always, hey, the facts don't care about your feelings.
That's right.
I heard that my whole life. Hey, the facts don't care about your feelings.
That is exactly right. Get over it. Life is tough. Life is hard. You better bear with it.
My dad was military.
I kind of live in both worlds, so I know what you're talking about. Other thoughts on this? Yeah.
Well, since we have to be empathetic, and show that we're trying to feel where they're coming from, basically we can't have these discussions on Facebook because.
So true. How effective are these on Facebook? Because they can't look you in the eye and they can't feel. Now, here's the funny thing about it. This is all they do on Facebook. And they don't have any ability to do any relationships because they've spent all of their times there's a whole bunch of factors that go into this. But what we're talking about is this is the importance of the fact-value split. Who has seen this in conversations with people? Does this kind of ring true in terms of conversations with people? Hopefully this makes sense when you look back on other conversations and you go, oh, that's why they seem so crazy. They're actually not crazy. They're coming at it from just a completely different angle. Moderns came at it through this. Xers and millennials usually come at it through this. Well, Xers can kind of be both. But millennials will almost all come at it through this. And this is not going away anytime soon. And there's good things and there's bad things.
And we think it's crazy, but I mean, we do it with theology too. I mean, you'll be talking with someone about something about God, and I'm guilty of this too. They'll be like, well, I think, I describe it like this. I'm like, oh, it's really interesting. And then they talk, and they're like, and that's why we're all predestined. I say, oh, you're a Calvinist. Okay. And then anything they say, no, but seriously, if you look at the scripture, clearly everything's predetermined. I'm like, well, you're just saying that because you're a Calvinist. I mean, yeah, of course.
Yes.
So, I mean, we already do we already do that. We think, well, the facts that you have come up out of your values.
Yes.
And the facts that I claim to, you pick and choose because of your values.
Yes.
And if you say on Facebook, I'm not a racist, but, people will say, okay, just because you say that doesn't mean that you're not pulling your data from these values.
From these values. What do we think of this? Beth?
I think the fact-value split is also leading to a sort of value split because we're so individualized. Like our values get so specified and individualized that, that's not my news station, that's not my president. That's
not my president.
Not my problem.
Yeah.
And it's leading to this apathy that you see between a whole bunch of different situations and people.
Sure. Well, the fact value split's just a guideline, guys. This doesn't, you can't just boil all of our society's problems down to this. But this is useful when you're talking to people. Okay? When you're listening to people, listen. What do they think is important? Facts or values? Don't tell them what's important. Listen to what's important to them. Because you're not going to convince them or have an engagement with them unless you're hearing what's important to them. And if you try to pour facts down a values person's throat, what are you going to get?
Turn off.
Yeah.
They don't think you're objective. They don't believe it.
No, they don't believe it.
And may we always remember that whenever we are talking to someone other than a fellow believer, may we never be debating anything other than what is going to encourage relationship building and sharing the love of Christ. Unless we are talking with a fellow believer, may we never be debating something or discussing something that's going to divide us but draw us. May we never talk about the president or the all the other things that you mentioned earlier that sexuality or all the other hot topics or whatever, but talking about love and relationship building so that we can lead them to Christ. It's only with fellow believers that we should be debating all the other issues. Sometimes we get the cart before the horse so many times, and instead of winning people to Christ, we divide them and make them think the church is about no's and don'ts and hate.
Believe my list of truths, and then you're in.
Then you can come in. Instead of Christ is calling you, please come in. He's got life and freedom. And then after they accept Christ, then we can show them how that freedom comes.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Well, I think even when you're talking to somebody, I'm thinking about my hairdresser is going through a situation. She's never been very receptive to conversations that we've had about faith, but she's starting to rehab and she's kind of in a difficult place. And even just saying I think we have to preface some of the things that we say when we're talking to somebody who's in that values world with, this is what I believe, or and this is why I believe it, and this is how a life with Christ is giving me freedom. And speak to the things that mean something to her, and not about the facts, and not say, I feel like I can't even say, I'm praying for you to her, because that's not a value to her. I have to say it in a way that is a value to her.
From my experience, this related to me in this way. Talking to people in the mission field who believed that there were spirits living in that lake, and nothing I could ever do would convince them otherwise. But what I could do is convince them there's someone more powerful than them, who could defeat them. So that's a personal example that I do.
And this is how the gospel is able to be morphed and conformed. We don't throw it all away from scratch. The gospel's morphing in each culture. It's our job to morph it for our culture. It's your job to mold it to your culture at your work. And that means listening a lot more than talking. A lot of times we spend a lot more time talking and expecting them to hear it. And that's not really listening from where they're coming from. Because let me tell you guys, we have stepped one toe into postmodernism. So let's pray. Father, we're grateful for this opportunity to be here. We're grateful that you have given us the challenge and the job of witnessing in this world. Help us to hear people where they're at and to present your love and your life to them. We are thankful for all you give us. In your son's name we pray. Amen.